All right. Thank you for that introduction. This is indeed Fullcourt Passport. I am Ric Bucher. That is Boston Boki Nakbar. Boki, good to see you again. We now have EuroLeague action. It is live. It is happening. And I've actually found a way to be able to watch the games from here in the United States. It wasn't necessarily easy, but I found my way there. And you've mentioned the some of the new teams coming in, Dubai being one of them, right? It was exciting for me to see that first game against Partizan and just the vibe and the atmosphere. Somebody was asking me about this today, and I said, you know what? The EuroLeague right now feels to me like the NBA when I first started covering it 25 years ago. Like making gains, raising its profile and its overall professionalism and the entertainment value and all of that. So with that, I'm really excited to be diving into this subject and this season.
Yeah, good to see you too, Rick. Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, the season has started. A lot of excitement around it. It's a different kind of season. It feels a little bit different, I have to say, for many different reasons. We have more teams. There's a team from new region added. There's been some player movement. There's some maybe old faces in different teams that make those teams more of a contenders. And yeah, I watched so we had, for people who don't know, we had games Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday now. It's a lot of games, it's a lot of games that follow in 4 days. It's in Europe, we're not used to that, to be honest. In NBA for you guys is normal, right? When the season starts, every time you're going to turn on TV, especially if you have the league pass, there's going to be games on. In Europe, that wasn't the case some years ago. And now you have this change where there's constantly EuroLeague basketball on TV, and I'm still waiting to see how this is going to latch on with fans. Whether there's going to be a point where it's like too much, or people are going to actually like the fact that every time you turn on TV, there's a EuroLeague game, or almost every time.
There is that, and that is a complaint with the NBA with 82 games, and that it's just they don't carry enough importance, especially in contrast to the NFL here, where like every game is momentous.
Yeah.
And EuroLeague, I think, has by and large historically every game has been momentous because there just weren't that many of them, right?
Yeah.
And now you have more teams and sort of expanding the schedule. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of that. 38 games on the schedule. People will say, as we mentioned in the previous episode, the previous show, they will say, well, it's only 38 games. NBA, teams play 82. Yeah, but you got to count in also that all these teams that you see on EuroLeague also play domestic leagues, where in some cases they play same number or more in their domestic leagues. Depending also the cup games and all that. So. It's a lot, and travel is difficult. So it's definitely a marathon, and I think you'll see situations where some teams are going to do great early on, and then they just might fall off, or vice versa. I think the teams, coaches, coaching staff, players are approaching this differently than they used to. Like you mentioned before, like when I played EuroLeague, we had I think it was like 16 games or something like this. Like it was a slow number of games. And that already got you into the playoffs.
Yeah.
Now it's like 38. That's a different animal. So, but the excitement is still there in terms of games are really high level and extremely competitive, as we mentioned many times in the previous shows as well.
How different do teams that are in EuroLeague, how different do they approach their EuroLeague competition versus their domestic competition?
I think it depends a little bit from which country teams are from. You'll have teams from Spain, for example, who have a very tough Spanish ACB league. And I'm sure they approach it the same way, or at least they try to, because every weekend that you play the domestic league game, whether it's Saturday or Sunday, there's a good team waiting for you, not just to play against you and to beat you, but they're waiting for this potentially the whole year to host one of the big teams, FC Barcelona, Real Madrid coming to town, right? That's like one big day on the schedule. Whereas if you're player for one of those two teams, you're constantly playing games, and you might play, like we saw this week, 2 games this week. So Tuesday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Friday, whatever. Those other teams rested in the meantime in domestic leagues. So from that standpoint, it makes it very tough. But on the other hand, you have some other countries where domestic league is not as tough, and there's not so many good teams. And those teams can play around a little bit and maybe rest some players over the weekend or play less minutes because they still know they'll most likely win those games, unless they play like a rival or something. So it really depends, but it is not easy. It is not easy, and a lot of times players, honestly saying, have a little bit of a problem, get hyped up the same way for domestic league game in a smaller arena. Not as many fans maybe.
Sure.
Where EuroLeague, you saw some of the games. I mean, it gets crazy. It gets crazy.
Insane. Yeah. We've talked a lot through the first couple of episodes. We talked a lot about the contrasts and comparisons of the NBA and EuroLeague and international basketball. And in a number of those situations, you said, well, it's changing, or it hasn't been like that. Whether we were talking about star empowerment or any number of things, what do you see? Do you see EuroLeague and international competition sort of becoming more like the NBA? Do you see elements of the NBA that are becoming more prevalent in EuroLeague?
Elements, yes, but for me to say that it's becoming like NBA, I think it would be an overstatement. I think by elements, I mean the game is definitely quicker, faster. There's, the pace is higher. Just watching some of the scores, and this week you can see games are up in the 90s most of the time. I mean, back in the day, and I'm not talking so far back, maybe 15, 20 years ago, like yearly games were like 60 points, 70 point games, which are still going to happen, especially at some point in the season, but definitely playoffs. But here you see now regularly teams reaching 90 and 100 points. And don't forget, games in Europe or in international play are 8 minutes shorter than NBA games. So it's a lot of scoring. And the other thing is also, when I mentioned this change, we're going to see how players and teams in general are going to be adjusting to the fact that they play so many games, which also means more travel, right? Are they going to pace themselves more? There might be a little bit of that where, like, you mentioned it the other day, when we were talking about NBA games, like, players like to kind of ease their way into the season or kind of go slow at certain points, and maybe when it matters the most, they turn it on. In Europe, we were not used to that, and that's why I'm kind of saying, like, I have this wait and see approach, how this is going to develop this season. If there's going to be teams and players that are going to kind of turn it on as the second part of the season starts, later, in 2-3 months later.
Is that an adjustment for international players when they come to the NBA and they're playing 82 games? Is to manage like what their approach has been previously, which is everything matters, every game matters, to you can't possibly take that approach with the schedule the way that it is and the number of games that you're playing?
Yeah, I think it definitely takes some time to adjust. It's a lot, but I wouldn't say that it's only for international players. It's probably for college players as well. They don't play as many games, right? True. So I think it's overall adjustment for all the players. But one thing is for sure that in European basketball, in the past, when it wasn't this crazy schedule of 38 games, teams would practice a lot more. So you would be practicing much more, I think, than an average college player or a pro in the NBA. Because the teams would just do like a lot of two-a-days back in the day, like even during the season, that was like a normal thing. Now, no more. Also with the, let's say, with Players Association stepping in and putting down some rules as far as practice and recovery and all that. But you still have teams in other leagues that are not EuroLeague that I'm sure still do a lot of two-a-days. If they play one game a week, like a lot of times teams will do at least 2 times a week, two-a-day practice. So my point is you'll practice a lot more. And then if you go to the NBA at one point, the change is going to be that you practice way less and you play a lot. But as a player, you always enjoy to play more than practice more. Let's be honest, right? So it's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a problem. As long as you're in the rotation and you play, I think every player is happy about that.
how different is the development and the practice today compared to when you were coming up?
I think less. I think less of a difference. When I was coming up, I think it was, I mean, definitely from where I come from Slovenia. Like a lot of the coaches I had early on were kind of like an old school Yugoslavian type coaches. Hard practice, a lot of work on, individual technique, a lot of shooting, a lot of team play, which I kind of miss. I think when I watch NBA games or college games, I think it's a lot of a team play that they teach you early on. One dribble pass, movement without the ball, that's big. So I think from that standpoint, it's different. But I do see that it's changing in Europe as well a little bit. It's becoming more individual. It's going more towards that one guy taking over. A lot of pick and roll game. For me, almost too much. And comparing that to the NBA, I think it's becoming very similar. But we spoke about this issue last week, where we kind of explained how EuroLeague teams are now struggling with developing young players for two reasons. One, they are focused on winning games. So EuroLeague their pro team, their first team, let's say in the club, the main team, is not going to really dig into developing players a lot. The coaching staff focus is going to be on the pro team and winning. But also the second thing, as you mentioned, is a lot of players leaving to college, right? So teams are going to have to make some adjustments there in the future in order to be able to keep players and offering them opportunity to, number one, develop, and number two, to play.
One of the things that struck me is with Jabari Parker and Kendrick Nunn, their reputations coming out of the NBA and going overseas was they couldn't stay healthy. I mean, Kendrick Nunn, just Lakers fans will tell you, they just thought he was stealing money because he just his 2 years there, he never played. And Jabari ran into the same situation, and none of that has existed for them so far when it comes to playing overseas. And so I have a theory. I've come up with a theory as to
let's hear it.
Why that is. But I wanted to get yours first. If you have some thoughts about is it just coincidence, or is there something about EuroLeague and competition overseas that is different and is the reason that they might be healthy where they weren't in the NBA?
Yeah, I think first of all, they're both amazing players. To me, both definitely NBA talent, NBA level players. That's number one. Number two, I don't know their, let's say, daily or weekly or monthly or yearly routine when it comes to preparation to be able to talk about them individually. But I will say this, that teams in Europe have grown tremendously when it comes to strength and conditioning and to the science behind it. Now, I can't say that that's why Nunn is staying on court, or that's why Jabari Parker is staying on court more and staying healthy. But I wouldn't be surprised that has something to do with it. First of all, helping those guys prepare before the season, and then maintaining that level of health and readiness during the season as well. And some might say maybe EuroLeague season is less demanding than the NBA, less physical, slower to a certain degree, yes, but I think it still has a lot of wear and tear involved. Like I mentioned before, a lot of tough games, a lot of tough travel. Coaches still like to practice hard at certain points, especially early in the season. Some coaches will practice hard throughout the season, and maybe that's a factor as well, where players, they stay in shape throughout the season. They don't lose that muscle tone or flexibility or agility. I'm not an expert in this, but I think that would be an interesting discussion to have with people who work with some of those guys who are now healthy and were not healthy before.
So I think it also has to do with the game and the way the game is played, because there's so many soft tissue injuries in the NBA, and for all of the medical advances and the amount of money that teams invest in therapy and the medical staff and training and all of that, and it's I mean, they have divisions unto themselves in NBA teams now, and the medical staff has more influence than ever on who's going to play. And I mean, they literally go to the coach and say, this guy's bio numbers say that he should not play the next game, or he should only play 22 minutes or whatever. It's driving coaches crazy. But but that's the reality. And yet, it does not seem as if it is curtailing the injuries that you see, particularly the soft tissue injuries. And I believe it's because the game is so athletic and so fast that guys are constantly extending themselves to go as fast and be as acrobatic and all of that as they can. And in EuroLeague, because of the physicality, you can't go like, and you could speak to this probably better, but when the game's wide open, you can go as fast as you want to, knowing that you're not going to get knocked out of the air. But when it's physical, you got to be a little more conscientious about how hard you go, right? And you play at a different pace, and you're more conservative in a way with your movement, is what I would say, right? You stay more solid so that you can stay balanced when you're taking those hits. And I honestly believe, I think that may be, what degree of factor it is in all of this. But I would say that the NBA trying to get a little more physical again wouldn't be a bad thing when it comes to act. It sounds
No, I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Paradoxical, right?
Yeah.
Get more physical in order to decrease the number of injuries.
I think, first of all, we do have a lot of injuries in Europe as well. But I think that sometimes people forget when they simply say, well, EuroLeague has a high number of games and that's the only factor why players are getting injured. Not to a point that they're getting injured in the NBA, at least I don't think so, but still. But I always, my response always is you have to look at the 365 schedule of the player, because a lot of players will play 38 games of EuroLeague, let's say 38, 40, whatever, games in domestic league, plus the cup games or and so on. Then the playoffs. And a lot of those players are going to go play national team either during the season of EuroLeague, if the club allows them to go and the situations opens up for them to go to like 1 or 2 qualifying games, but definitely in the summer. So what happens is, unlike players in the NBA that will finish the season, maybe if they don't make the playoffs, will finish the season in April or mid-April, and then their season will start in October. Players in EuroLeague will play since early October until basically June, and then play national team, and then sometimes even miss the start of training camp to join the club again. And that piles up. So I think you have a different problem here, but I think you are making a good point. Like I wouldn't say so much the physicality, even, but more of the speed of the game. I think NBA, with the talent that it has and the rules that allow this open game and change your direction and the speed of fast breaks and up and down, I think that definitely has something to do with the soft tissue injuries that you mentioned, right? I think in EuroLeague it's a lot more because of that grind type of game, and you see these types of injuries. But again, that would be interesting data to look into and compare. And I think that NBA is still ahead with, it's a couple of steps ahead with collecting this data. But in EuroLeague, that's also being followed over the last couple of years. So comparing this data would be, I think, very interesting.
Yeah, and there are different types of injuries, right? I'm just thinking of all of the investment that the NBA has had, and you just see so many guys, there's Jason Tatum, like all these stars that are going down without getting touched. It's one thing if you turn an ankle or you like somebody steps on your foot or you come down on like those to me are different types of injuries than what we are seeing in the NBA that seems so startling, because there's so much time and energy and focus on getting guys in premium condition and protecting them from those kind of injuries, and it doesn't seem to be working.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit scary if you think about it. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think as far as the players that play a lot of minutes, I would call them superstars, like Dame Lillard, Halliburton, Tatum, like that. Those are all like the Achilles tears, right? I mean, there's more, but luckily, we haven't seen as many Achilles tear in EuroLeague, at least not consecutively in such a short time frame.
Yeah.
And hopefully we won't. But I think that has something to do with what we're discussing here, with just the speed of the game and the way it's open. And I listened actually commentary to one of the famous U.S. journalist, I think it was either yesterday or today, talking about that NBA should reconsider the rules and maybe apply some of the rules that would slow the game down a little bit in order to protect the players. And that's exactly in the line of what we're discussing here now.
Yeah. No, I think there's a way to officiate it or kind of move the style of play that would encourage that. And I also believe that it would bring more team basketball into it, because it's just, at least for longtime basketball fans, the up and down just becomes a little too rote when everybody's just playing fast. It feels too cookie cutter, there's not enough unique system and style and contrast in teams. Everybody's playing the same way, same speed, same approach. So, yeah, that's well, we can solve problems all day when it comes to the game. And there's also, for me, having been around it for so long, like, it's hard not to get nostalgic at times for what you saw and the way that it was played. I wonder this: how many times did you shoot a step back 3-pointer in your career?
Yeah, not many. Probably did a couple of times, but not many. That wasn't a thing. You maybe did it more in the last second of an offense or something to shake your defender and shoot it. Now it became it's like a weapon, But I also, when I watched the step back shot or side steps nowadays, I think the way the players shuffle their feet 20 years ago would be called a travel.
100%.
So
100%. James Harden introduced a step back that is three solid 3 steps, if not 4.
And it's getting more and more allowed also, I think, in international basketball. I see players do it now where they shuffle their feet and they kind of make that an extra step on the side and then 1-2, So you kind of see that. And I'm okay with that. I'm fine with players and the game evolving and players finding new ways to be more effective and the rules allowing that a little bit. I just don't like when it goes overboard and somebody really takes a full advantage of making 2 or 3 steps that are just too much. And I don't mean just in the, in shooting, but also in dribbling the ball, penetrating, stuff like that. I think that's for me is too much.
How do you feel about because in international, they're very conscious of your first step. The ball's got to hit the floor first, right? And the NBA allows you to take that step and then drop the ball. And it catches Team USA all the time. You see so many travel calls by guys having to adjust to that. How do you feel about that particular element? Do you think there's a great advantage to the offensive player in that?
I think that, first of all, yes, huge advantage. But I also think that in international basketball, that is allowed more now. It's not as rigorous. It's not as closely looked at. For example, when I played still in Europe, before I went to the NBA, you literally had to make a dribble first before you moved right. Let's say that left was your pivot foot, right? You had to dribble and go. Yep. It was not allowed to step and go. Now you can step and go. And in some cases, I see that referees would even allow the back foot to be lifted before the ball hits the floor. So there's more leniency to. I'm fine with that. Like I said before, as long as it's not overly, that is not done in a case that it's complete 1-2 travel before the ball hits the floor. And especially I don't have a problem with it if a player does not gain any advantage of that with that move, So if, for example, the defender is far away and he does that move, I don't get hung up on that. But yeah, it was an adjustment for me when I went to the NBA. I'm sure that for other NBA or European players as well. It's called less now, it's allowed more, but yeah, back in the day it was tough, was rigorous. It was a rule that you really had to adjust to as an international player, because in the NBA allows you so much more freedom to do that, including Eurostep, for example. Eurostep, I did the Eurostep. I gotta make this disclaimer. I would do Eurostep in practice when I went to the NBA in the preseason with the Rockets. Yeah, the whole team, everybody, Steve Francis, Mobley, all those guys were travel, and I was like, what are you talking about? It's left, right. You can do that in Europe.
Right.
And it wasn't allowed while I was playing in the NBA. Once I leave the NBA, it becomes a thing. And I'm like, oh, come on, man. Because that was one of my weapons that I actually did as a player,
Right.
back when,
Right.
even when I was younger. So, but I'm happy that that's now not just allowed in the NBA, but it's actually called the Eurostep. I think us European players are kind of proud of that.
You bring up something that I think is important, and I don't know that I'm never going to convince everybody to approach it this way, but there are so many changes from generation to generation in the way the game has evolved. And not to say it's better or worse, but to compare, particularly statistically, what guys do from one era to the next and use that as the measuring stick for how great guys were, or guys are better today than they were back then. It's a silly comparison because of
Yeah.
some of the things that you said. And the one thing I will say is, in the time that I've covered the game over the last 25, 30 years, by and large, all of the rule adjustments have been to the benefit of the offense. And so the idea that because guys are shooting better or scoring higher or any of that, that today's players are so much better than the players back in the day, I just think is a false comparison,
Yeah.
and should not be made for that reason.
Yeah. To be honest, in Europe, we don't get hung up on these comparisons from players from previous decades. It's not even a thing. I think that has a lot to do with American sports culture and
Mm,
maybe journalism and fans, and that's always the hot topic. Like who's better, this player, that player, and not just
yeah,
in basketball. I see it's done the same way in other sports as well, which is okay. It's fine. We just, in Europe, we don't do those comparisons, and yeah, maybe also because you know, in Europe, it's always been team first or club first before players. So you might be you're gonna see fans maybe compare teams, right? Like our team in
yeah,
that era was better than this team in that era. Players, not so much. And I don't. I think that's fine. I think in the States, you guys overdo it a little bit with comparing players from different eras. I
yeah.
never was a fan of that.
Before we leave the whole player development topic, I'm curious what how player development or training for you in the NBA when you got there compared to before you got there, and the training that you got afterward when you went back and played for some of the top
Mhm.
teams in Europe.
Um, maybe it's different from player to player. For me, particularly, the first year that I was in the NBA was used basically for me to get quicker, stronger, faster. I didn't play that much my first year, and I knew that going in because Yao was the first pick and I was the second first rounder, but there was just, let's say, room really for one to
Hmm.
get meaningful minutes.
Hmm.
So I spent a lot of time also in the weight room, which I think at that time could have been done better. By that I mean that I think the focus with me was too much on just gaining weight and becoming stronger, and I think I initially lost some of that speed and agility that I recovered later on in second, third season, and so on. But compare that to European development, a lot more focus on technique, on shooting than I saw in the NBA, especially the way how to shoot, how to get open, coming off screens, using flare screens, and things like that. I haven't really seen a lot of that in the NBA. Maybe some individual technique as far as dribble and stuff like that, but I think in NBA was more about playing without the ball.
Yeah.
And once I came back to Europe, I was already an established player. I wouldn't say veteran, but I was 28, 29 at the time when I returned back. And at that time, it wasn't so much of a development anymore. It was just about maintaining shape, maintaining technique, and just playing games and trying to win games, because I played in some teams that was demanded of you to win games more than anything else. So I kind of missed that development part, and I even would stay after practice or go before practice to kind of work with an assistant coach just to kind of maintain those things that I was used to doing, whether that was in the NBA or before that, because I always like to continue to work on individual things throughout my career, not just when I was younger.
Okay. All right. So you asked me to pick
Yeah.
the 5. You wanted to turn
Yeah.
the tables.
Yeah, there we go. I'll do the questioning. So in last episode, we were discussing 5 American players in EuroLeague that could be, let's say, leading their teams, right?
Yes.
That will make the biggest impact, let's say,
Yes.
right? It's a
Yes.
very tough question because we have a lot of good newcomers in EuroLeague as well, first time players from the States who I think are going to do great. But this time I'm asking you. Not the obvious question, which are going to be the 5 best international players in the
Right.
NBA.
You can name those. You can take them off the MVP
Exactly.
list from last year.
That would be too easy. That would be a layup. Like, I need you to do a step back 3 now, Rick. So, so the question is, which 5 players do you think are going to raise some eyebrows? International players are going to actually have a bigger impact on their team play than maybe initially thought. So maybe the guys that are not locked to be a starter, not locked to be playing big minutes, but somebody,
You've changed it a little bit.
A little bit.
I mean, I have some of those, but here's the difficulty, because number one, how are we defining an international player? Because this goes to why we're doing this podcast, because you now have guys that I would consider international players that have come over and played in college.
Right.
I
would still say guys that are eligible to play for other national teams than USA. How's that?
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Well, the first one is, you probably think this is I'm shooting fish in a barrel. This is too easy. But for me, Franz Wagner, I think is I expect really big things out of Orlando. And his year last year was affected by injury, tore a stomach muscle, only played 60 games. But he has grown every year, and I believe that Orlando is at that tipping point. And one of the reasons why I'm really high on France still being a factor, in spite of the fact that I think that the Orlando Magic are going to be loaded. Like, sometimes a guy can star because he's getting the ball a lot and there are injuries, and he can, he plays a bigger role than he will if the team's at full force. I thought that the way that France played with Team Germany in Eurobasket was a great preparation for playing with Paolo Banchero and Jalen Suggs when he gets back, and adding Desmond Bane now to the group, right? Like, his ability to find his spots and still be impactful without having to dominate the ball. I think I saw a lot of that in Eurobasket. And so I'm expecting big things out of him. I'm also expecting big things out of Tristan De Silva, who I thought had a great Eurobasket. It's for all the names that I mentioned with Orlando, I think it's going to be very competitive to get minutes. But he had, because of those injuries last year, he had a great opportunity to show what he could do. And again, because if France is healthy, if Paolo is healthy, if Suggs is back, Desmond Bane is there, they're going to need guys who can play and impact the game without the ball. And I believe De Silva is one of those guys who defensively can do a lot of things, and be a factor, be able to knock down an open shot if it comes his way, but really be able to fit in with the dynamics. And I just think Orlando is going to be one of those teams that everybody, I don't know that they can beat Oklahoma City from last year, but I think they're ready to take a big step from 41-41, which was their record last year, simply because of the injuries.
Would you say that it's possible? Well, everything's possible, but in a sense that they improve so much that we could see them in the Eastern Finals, for example. Is that something that they should?
I could, just in part because the Eastern Conference is so wide open.
Yeah.
Philadelphia, the injuries with Joel Embiid and Paul George. Boston Celtics are in a completely different place.
Yeah.
The Miami Heat, I'll be interested to see. I know what you. I thought of having Nikola
Yeah.
Jovic in the mix. I think the problem for him in Miami is Kalel Ware, I think, is very, very good. And Jaime Jaquez has already kind of established himself. So the question that I have with Jovic, while I think he has a lot of potential, is he going to get the opportunity in Miami to be able to do what I think he's capable of doing?
Well, they committed to him for 4 years, right? So
Contractually,
there's contractually, so there's some indication that he should get some of those opportunities to
for
do
sure.
step forward. Yeah.
For sure. No, I mean
Mm.
he's going to be a factor. I'll be interested to see how, because Eric Spoelstra doesn't care how much money you're making, right? I mean, Pat will do that, and if you're doing everything that you need to and you're playing
Mhm.
for them very smart, efficient basketball, then you're going to get minutes for the Miami Heat.
Mhm.
And Jovic, I thought, was up and down last year when he had an opportunity to kind of establish himself. Obviously, he did enough to prove that that he deserved the contract that he got. And I'm laughing because I can't help but think that there was a time where Pat Riley, we talked about it a few episodes ago. Pat Riley never drafted foreign players.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
not believe in it. And now you look at their roster and who they've been drafting over the last 3-4 years.
Well, I think a Slovenian might have something to do with that. Goran Dragic was the guy that they signed, and he did really well. So maybe he's the one that changed, Pat Riley's mind about that.
No
So
question. And I would say that if Goran hadn't gone to San Antonio and been the player that he was there for them, I don't know that Pat rolls the dice and says, "Okay, if he can
yeah,
meet
yeah,
Pop's
yeah,
standard, then
yeah, yeah, yeah,
he can meet
yeah, yeah.
ours." Um, Here's another guy who you're going to think I'm picking, I'm picking the low hanging fruit, but um, I think Zachary Rissacher
Hmm.
can have a big year for the Atlanta Hawks. The pressure of being the number one and having to be a franchise player. I don't know if he's a franchise player, but I think that he's definitely starting material. I think he has the potential to be a very dynamic two-way player, both defensively and offensively. I was really in Eurobasket in particular, his defense, his help defense, his length, like there was a lot of good things that I saw matched up with Luca at times. Like
Hmm.
I really was impressed with Rissacher, and maybe some of this is one, seeing him in Eurobasket, and two, I didn't really know what to make of him when he first came into the NBA. Like I just hadn't seen enough or knew enough, and the tape that I had seen, it was like it wasn't
It was a
enough
little
for
bit
me to,
undefined. Yeah, yeah. I was saying the
right?
same. It was the same in Europe. It was kind of like undefined as far as like what his real position is and how he would adjust to the NBA. But I think you're right. I think he's still young enough or very young to a point where he still has a chance to improve a lot. And it's something that we spoke about the other, a week or two ago, is also about the opportunity of being on the right team that can develop you properly and give you the role that you need to develop as a player. And I'm not sure if in Atlanta that's really the case. Could be. I'm not saying no. I just don't see
Yeah,
enough. I don't watch enough. You're an expert in this.
yeah.
So hopefully that happens for him, where he can really develop to a point and become a factor, like you said, to elevate the whole team, not just his own play.
Well, I think the timing is good for him because they've changed GMs. Landry Fields is gone, and DeAndre Hunter left midway through Cleveland. It's sort of the same position that Rissacher plays. I think the opportunity is there. I think they're looking at trying to remake this team. Nelson Capella is gone. Like a lot of established players. Bogdanovich going to the Clippers.
Hmm.
Like a lot of opportunity has opened up over the last year with Rissacher, and I think that what he has shown and what I saw over the summer, I could see him. Wings who can two-way wings are just so valuable and so important in the NBA today. Um, that he fits that profile, which is why I really think that he can blossom and be something. Now,
Who else you got?
well, so here's the question: do I consider Matas Buzelis an international player? I mean, he was born in the U.S., but to Lithuanian parents, he plays for the Lithuanian national team. I mean, he grew up in Chicago, but if you asked an NBA fan like who Buzelis is, they would say, "Oh, he's an international."
Interesting. I thought you would say that fans would say that he's American. Okay.
I really don't think so. Whether it's the spelling of his name or because he for a guy who grew up here, he carries himself like a Euro, like the whole look, the hair,
Yeah.
all of it. He's got a very European vibe to him. He speaks Lithuanian. He's going to play for the Lithuanian national team.
So let's consider him international. I mean, which he is. So he's on the list. Okay.
So he's on my list too. I just think again the Bulls are sort of in transition, and with Zach LaVine leaving kind of midway through last season, Mattis had to fit in around him and Kobe White, and I feel as if they're turning the corner now and realizing that he can play a bigger role for them. But I'm curious what your feeling is about him. I liked everything that I saw about him last year, in spite of a sort of a checkered season for the Bulls.
Yeah, I don't want to speak, let's say, negatively in any kind of way that he was not good enough before. I just think that personally, he surprised me a lot. Like, he did a lot more than I thought he will. But I think I have to contribute that honestly also to the fact that I didn't see him play as much as I would some of the kids here in Europe, just because he was in the States. So I didn't follow him as closely. I didn't see his development or his, let's say, how far he can get as a player. Obviously, there was certain hype around it, but I think he did much better than I thought he would initially in his first couple of seasons in the NBA. So, I think it's a good pick. Honestly, I think you chose right.
Okay, so my last one, you're gonna like this one.
Okay,
this one I think is next time. Define what you want from me more clearly, and then I will dig deeper.
No, I think it's good. I think we kind of found the right niche of players here that I get what you're trying to say with each one of them. So I think you're on point.
So, and the tricky part is when you have new international players coming in, and I've just seen this so often. Like, there's guys that I have on my list that I could see them playing important roles or stepping into roles, but especially the younger ones, they usually have to wait at least a year for sort of the same thing that you went through. It's like, oh, we got to get you physically more ready to play at this pace. And so I could say, hey, I think this guy has potential, but my question of whether they're going to get the opportunity to show it is why I didn't necessarily go that direction. This guy, I think, is certainly going to get the opportunity, and that is Neemias Queta. Am I pronouncing that right? Neemias Queta, from Portugal, with the Boston Celtics. Now he's been in the NBA a couple of years, but gone is Porzingis, gone is Al Horford, gone is Luke Cornett. I mean, he's going to be competing with like Chris Boucher and Xavier Tillman. It is wide open for him to have an opportunity to step in and have a role with the Boston Celtics and maybe establish himself where I can be a full-time player. He's the only 7-footer on the team. He's the only legit big. And the glimpses that I saw of him last year, I saw some promise. I saw some potential there.
And he had a really good summer with the national team. I think a lot of people noticed the way he plays. And I think if he would be in EuroLeague, he'd definitely be every team would go after him, trying to get him. Like, that's a profile of a player that I think would do really well in EuroLeague. But I think you're right. I think, this is another situation where a player that is, is being kind of, in the back or on the bench or kind of just trying to get minutes, and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 dominoes fall. Some injuries happen, some trades happen, whatever, and you get your opportunity, and it's really up to the player. But I think in his case, I think he's ready. I think he's ready to step up and play. Also, like I said before, because of the summer he had, it's always good when players have not a 4 or 5 month break where you don't know where they are, what they're doing. Are they working out? Are they getting faster, quicker? No, like he's been training with national team, playing with national team, and played really well, and that usually carries over really well. Not just the play, but the confidence that comes with it. And especially now getting the getting minutes and getting his position open, like you said, the only 7-footer on the team, it's going to be really in his hands to take that and use it, to the best of his abilities. And yeah, there was a lot of buzz around him in the summer. So everybody, a lot of people are really interested to see how he's going to do, especially because he comes from Portugal, which is not considered a, let's say, top level basketball country in Europe, right? So to have a guy that comes from that was not on the radar of EuroLeague teams in the past, and everybody's watching him now. But I think he'll do well. And if he doesn't, like I said before, he's going to have opportunities to come over at any point. But hopefully he does. Celtics.
All right, so that's my list. Franz
Okay.
Wagner, Tristan De Silva, Zachary Rissacher, Mattis Buzelis, and Neemias Queta. That's my 5 to keep an eye on. For all of the listeners out there, you can keep a scorecard. We'll see what happens. I tried to hedge my bets on guys that aren't like top of the top.
That's what we're looking for, yeah. But the guys that might step up and elevate their game even more. There's obviously a difference between Wagner and other guys, but I get your point. Like Wagner is in a position where him making it another step now is not just going to help him, but it could legitimately push the Magic to go to the Eastern Finals or more, right? So, but I like that. Different levels, different type of players, different situations. I think that was really good. So you made that step back 3.
Okay.
You made it.
Thank you. By the way, there's a lot of talk, especially with the NBA starting and with all the guys that played in Eurobasket. Does that, having played at that level, it has to prepare you for training camp, right? You have to be coming into the season like at a certain level. Is there any counter effect? Does it affect you at some point as well, maybe in a more negative way? And if so, when does that happen?
Probably not early on. I think it's more of a thing of the second part of the season later on when the games stack up, because at that point you're going to be playing already for 6, maybe 7 months, right?
Yeah.
And at some point with some players, you see that fatigue kicking in at that point where players' game kind of drops towards the end of regular season. Sometimes I think we should attribute that to players having long summer and very exhausting, not just physically, but emotionally very exhausting summer. Like we spoke about how much it means in previous weeks, how much it means for players to play for national teams. So a lot of times, whether you win or even more so if you lose, like that's mentally, that's draining. It's I think you can see effects later on in the season, because once you come to training camp, it's all hype. It's media day, it's new team, maybe new coach. Hey, we got high goals. We want to make playoffs. We want to do this, that. But once you get into that routine and 3-4 months go by, that's when usually you see effect of a long summer as well.
Yeah. And when you were playing, did you go home every summer? Did you go back to Slovenia every summer?
Yeah, I did.
And what was it like going back? And then I assume you did some training there at some point. And just culturally, like leaving the U.S., leaving whether it was New Jersey or Houston or whatever, and then being home again for what, 2 months or so?
Yeah, more. It depends how my summer looked like. In most summers, I played with national teams, so I would, depending how far we went with the team, I would take a little bit of time off, go back into training, and then join national team and play national team basketball in the summer. But if I didn't, then I think I did it twice. That happened, that I didn't play with national team. Then the off season felt really long. And I don't mean that only in a bad way, right? Because it allows you to do so many things. One, you rest a little bit. Then number two, you can really work on things that you need to work on.
Yeah.
And that's something that European players miss because, as I mentioned before, you have 9-month long season. Then you jump into the national team. Then you go back into the next season again with the EuroLeague club. Then it's a cycle that you never really get more than a couple of weeks off in the summer.
Yeah.
Whereas in comparison with some NBA players who are not on national teams, like they'll get 4 or 5 months off completely. And for me, it was great. It was awesome. I loved it. But I did stay active, and I would do all the other sports as well. At some point, I did like tennis in the summer, and then I would do some like kickboxing or whatever, and always did some swimming. But I always trained as well. And I stayed active, and sometimes I would return back to the States, do some training with the team that I was on, individual, or the teams would send coaches over to Slovenia to work with me. So it depended, but it was a long off season, that's for sure.
Were they sending coaches over to work with you or to check up on you?
Both.
Because
Both.
I get the sense that with NBA coaches and teams, when an international player goes home, there's a big question in their minds as to, is he going home and he's just eating and drinking and relaxing and living his life, or what? And then everybody's checking to see what kind of shape he's in when he comes back. I guess that's the answer there.
I think without sounding that I'm bragging too much, I don't want it to sound like this, but I think the teams that I was on, whether it was in NBA or in Europe, I think they had enough trust in me being professional enough to not go down that route, to get out of shape, to drink, to party and things like that, because I never was into that. So it wasn't that much about that part. With some other players, it was. I heard examples where like teams were like really worried about what the players are going to do off season. I think for me, it was just about checking me and how I'm doing. Things are in order, and what I'm doing as far as practice. And then coaches would spend like 10 days, 2 weeks in Slovenia, and we would just do some drills and things like that. And I liked it, honestly. I thought that teams cared, especially with the Nets was like this. They would send always somebody over, and I appreciated that. So I think that in my case, that was good. But I can see that for some players, that can be very annoying.
Was there any, like, facility-wise, did you have everything that you needed? I just think of the NBA and what they provide. It's like, and even not to say that aren't those facilities or those things overseas, but it depends on where you live, your access to it and the level of it.
Yeah, but I think, we're talking now 15 years ago or more. I mean, it was a little bit simpler back then. Like, I didn't even seek some of those machines or the equipment that nowadays teams have. For me, it was enough to have a nice basketball gym that has air conditioning and non-slippery floor. Give me six US basketballs. I actually brought from the States my own machine, like the gun, the machine that will pass the ball back. So I actually brought that.
Okay. Really?
Actually,
you had that shipped back?
I shipped it back.
How much did that cost?
It cost a bunch back then.
I was gonna say.
Now they have them in Europe, but back then I was probably one of the few. I mean, definitely the first and only player in Slovenia at that time that I had it. That machine, by the way, it's still operational. It still goes.
Nice.
So I use it in the summer, but not for me, but for kids and basketball camp and stuff like that.
Now we know why Tara's so good.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's what I did back then, and I lived in Slovenia close to the sea, so for me it was good enough to do a 2.5 hour practice, sweat it out, and then just walk over to the sea and just jump in the water, and that was the off season. I mean, living the life, and I never had any complaints that I didn't come to training camp ready, so I had to do something right,
Yeah, I wondered whether there was part of what you said in terms of international players so used to going through routines and working on specific things, whether it was just the NBA perspective of how American players sometimes operate when they're left to their own devices, that they don't necessarily follow protocol.
I mean, Europeans too, don't get me wrong. Like, Europeans go crazy as well. I mean, I'm not going to talk about it here because I don't want to do damage to any of my friends, but I've seen situations when guys would really let it go in the summer. and you kind of understand it, like you're away from home for a long period of time, and you're dedicating to this profession, and it's all great, and you're getting paid for it. But when you go back home and you see your friends, you see your family, you also want to enjoy it as well, right?
Sure,
So it's all good.
All right. Well, once again, I've enjoyed this. That is the conclusion of another episode of Fullcourt Passport. We will be back next week with another episode. Boki, once again, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.